November 24th, 1971. The night before Thanksgiving, the only unsolved plane jacking in U.S. history took place. The investigation went on for decades, yet it remains unsolved. So how did he do it? Well, here's the official story, according to the FBI. On the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, a nondescript man calling himself D.B.Cooper approached the counter of Northwest Orient Airlines in Portland, Oregon. He used cash to buy a one-way ticket on Flight 305 bound for Seattle, Washington. Thus began one of the great unsolved mysteries in FBI history. Cooper was a quiet man, who appeared to be in his mid-40s wearing a business suit with a black tie and white shirt. He ordered a drink, bourbon and soda, while the flight was waiting to take off. A short time after 3 p.m., he handed the stewardess a note indicating that he had a bomb in his briefcase and wanted her to sit with him. The stunned stewardess did as she was told, opening a cheap attaché case. Cooper showed her a glimpse of a mass of wires and red-colored sticks and demanded that she write down what he had told her. Soon, she was walking a whole new note to the captain of the plane that demanded for 4 parachutes and $200,000 in $20 bills. When the flight landed in Seattle, the hijacker exchanged the flight's 36 passengers for the money and parachutes. Cooper kept several crew members, and the plane took off again, ordered to set a course for Mexico City. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, a little after 8 p.m., the hijacker did the incredible. He jumped out of the back of the plane with the parachute and the ransom money. The pilots landed safely, but Cooper had disappeared into the night, and his ultimate fate remains a mystery to this day. The FBI learned of the crime in flight and immediately opened an extensive investigation that lasted many years, calling it NORJAC, for Northwest Hijacking. We interviewed hundreds of people, tracked leads across the nation, and secured the aircraft for evidence. By the 5-year anniversary of the hijacking, we'd considered more than 800 suspects and eliminated all but 24 from consideration. So let's just cover some quick details before we get into the suspects. When Cooper demanded that he be brought to Mexico City, the pilot claimed that he decided the route himself, and Cooper was unaware of any of it. Therefore, he had no plan as to where he was landing or where he would go. He also requested 4 parachutes rather than just 1. In theory, this is a better idea considering if they brought just 1 parachute, they could have tampered with it, but bringing 4 brought the possibility of him taking hostages with him. He did this so that they couldn't sabotage his parachutes. Also, a small child found $5,800 with matching serial numbers of the bills hijacked. This discovery was made on Tina Bar Beach in Washington. Richard Floyd McCoy was arrested after hijacking a Boeing 747. This hijacking had extremely similar circumstances to that of Dan Cooper's. They had both hijacked a plane, they both parachuted out of it, both jumped from the back of a Boeing 727 and requested 4 parachutes, and were both reported calm during the heist. Both of them passed notes about bombs, and in the notes they both said, "No funny stuff." Also, both hijackings happened to have taken place while his school was out for break. But there's a couple problems with this theory. They claim that he didn't match the description of Dan Cooper, and he was home in Utah the very next day for Thanksgiving dinner with his family. McCoy was sentenced to 45 years for his crime, eventually escaping from prison and dying in a gunfight with the FBI in Virginia. So even if he was the real D.B. Cooper, we have no way of knowing. Dwayne Weber claimed to have been D.B. Cooper on his deathbed. Reports say he grabbed his wife, pulled her in, and said, "I have a secret to tell you. I'm Dan Cooper." This led the wife to look back and put together certain things. She claimed that he would have nightmares in which he would sleep talk about being scared of leaving fingerprints on a plane. He had a knee injury that he claimed was from jumping out of a plane. Weber's handwriting was actually found in the margins of books about D.B. Cooper in the library. His wife also claims that he had taken her to the exact place the money was found on Tina Bar Beach. He also kept an old Northwest airline ticket for no apparent reason. Again, since he's gone, we have no real way of knowing if it was him or not. All we really have to go off in this situation is the word of his wife, who could just be making all this up in hopes of getting rich and famous. It all started when a man was watching an episode of Unsolved Mysteries on his couch. He became convinced that his brother, Kenneth Christensen, was actually D.B. Cooper. He claims, on his deathbed, Kenneth told him, "There is something you should know, but I cannot tell you." Kenneth Christensen was also the flight purser for Northwest Airlines, which is basically just the head flight attendant. He said that he loved bourbon, which is what he ordered on the plane, and he bought a new house shortly after the crime. His picture was also shown to the flight attendant who had talked to Cooper. She said that he was the closest match she'd seen. Although, she also said, "I cannot say yes." The FBI did discredit him as a suspect because they said he didn't match the description. He was also a paratrooper after World War II, and they believed Cooper wasn't a skilled jumper. Our final and most interesting suspect is Robert Rackstraw. He was a former US Army pilot in the Vietnam War, so he would have been trained in explosives, demolition, as well as parachuting. He never denied being Cooper, but he would go around saying, "Could have been." He would also say he was probably the only one who could close the case. His name was just recently released in declassified FBI documents. If they had all this evidence pointing towards this man, then why didn't they release his name sooner? Well, according to the documents, the FBI believed that he could have been an undercover CIA agent, so they kept it in the dark the entire time. This gives credit to the theory of an FBI cover-up. But we do have time for more realistic theories. Larry Carr, who took over the D.B. Cooper investigation, believes that Dan Cooper never actually survived the fall in the first place. We originally thought Cooper was an experienced jumper, perhaps maybe even a paratrooper. We concluded after a few years this was simply not true. Cooper had jumped with 2 chutes. One was functioning, but one was a training chute, which would mean that it was sewed shut and it wouldn't ever open. The functioning parachute was a military parachute, meaning that it was not even possible to steer it. He said no experienced jumper would have jumped in the pitch black of night, in the rain, with 200-mile-per-hour wind, in his face, in loafers and a trench coat. But the problem with this theory is that a body or a parachute was never found. The only item ever recovered was a clip-on JCPenney tie that he took off before he jumped out of the airplane, which leads us to our next theory. This comes from a website, Citizen Sleuths. They looked at the clip-on tie under a microscope and found over 100,000 particles. Among these were the elements cerium, strontium sulfide, as well as titanium. Now, Tom K says these are rare earth elements used for specific things in very specific fields. One company at the time that was using this was Boeing to design supersonic planes. This means the tie had to be inside of the factory, so he wouldn't be operating machine, he would be either a manager or an engineer at the plant. But this theory brings no suspects to the table. So, will this case ever be solved? Cooper was described to be in his mid-40s at the time of the hijacking. Being in 1971, that would approximate his age in the mid-90s today. If the real D.B. Cooper was ever to be found, he'd most likely already be deceased. The FBI has since closed its investigation, though many private parties continued their investigation in hopes of bringing some final closure.